Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to the 167th session of Majlis Khonji via Zoom. Please allow me to introduce our guest for this session, Mr. Charles Barker, Chairman and CEO of Hospitality Support and Consultancy Services. He has lived in many parts of the world running and developing hotels and tourism projects. For the last 5 years, he's been running a consultancy business advising both the public and private sector on sustainable hospitality and tourism development, subjects on which, among others, he also lectures. He has a passion for ocean conservation, and he's a director of an NGO in Hong Kong engaged in saving sharks from extinction. He's also a published author of 4 novels and an occasional blogger for political satire. Welcome, Mr. Charles, to Majlis Khonji, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for that warm welcome and for inviting me to talk to you. I'm going to be talking about the dilemma our future leaders will be facing in the context of climate change, global warming, and its consequences. Many qualified people are talking authoritatively on this subject, and indeed, just last week, you had a most thought-provoking presentation. So I do apologize if any of my remarks appear to duplicate that which has already been said. But before we get started, let me just quickly introduce myself, although Rahman has already done a very efficient job. I have lived for many years around the world running hotels and developing tourism projects. And I do now have this consulting business, which is my main work, which addresses both development of sustainable tourism in the public and private sector. I'm based in Pakistan, but also work in the broader Middle East. The passion I have for the oceans was largely started in Oman. I used to do a lot of scuba diving, and there I learned to enjoy the wonders of nature under the sea. But now I'm a director of an NGO in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Shark Foundation. And I could go on for ages about that, but we'll do that another time, perhaps. I first actually met a shark at Fahal Island, where I was scuba diving. So that was my first brush with sharks. I'm a published author of 4 novels and an occasional blogger of political satire, but you don't need to worry, I won't get into any of that, or I'll try not to, as the presentation continues. I first came to Muscat in 1988 and then ran the Intercontinental Hotel from 1989 to 1992. And to this day, it was always the favorite of my various assignments around the world. But I visited not long ago, and haven't things changed from those heady days in the 80s and 90s. So let's get on. I'm going to start by setting the climate change scene and establishing where we are now, how we have arrived there, and what the consequences are going to be. Much of this I'm sure you already know, but there may also be some surprises. I hope so. It is important that these are all very clearly understood before we reach and search for solutions and consider the skill sets and tools that our future leaders are going to require. Clearly, they are not going to be able to stop global warming, but there are practical steps that can and must be taken now in order to mitigate the impact of climate change. I will also discuss this in a broad context, not just in reference to tourism and hospitality, because in truth, this industry is interconnected with most others and every aspect of our lives. So we bounced into a new millennium with a sense of optimism and excitement, of anticipation and enthusiasm for great things to come. But the first quarter of this 21st century has given us one misery after another, and things seem to be getting worse. We began with 9/11, which was followed in short order with a so-called war on terror, a misnomer for regime change and the calamitous destruction of various nation states in the wider Middle East. Global recession followed with a heavy mix of racial, religious, cultural, and ethnic intolerance. The coronavirus then presented itself, and along with a variety of leadership failures, led to the closing of most international borders, some of which still remain closed. The day after COVID-19 was declared a public health emergency by the World Health Organization, the UK left the EU, and what a masterful decision that has turned out to be. Today, we are less than a quarter of the way through the millennium's first century and looking at the very real possibility of a world war. And in amongst all of this, mankind is at last waking up to the fact that the world is heating up and we are bringing upon ourselves the potential for extinction through global warming. As planet Earth's current custodians, I don't think we're doing a very good job, do you? Indeed, it would appear to me that the four horsemen of the apocalypse are now riding amongst us. So, what actually does climate change mean? Essentially, it refers to long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. These shifts are natural in the global scheme of things. But since the 1800s, human activities have been uncontrollably accelerating the process, primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels, which produces heat-trapping gases. Coupled with this, our general disregard for the environment has exacerbated the problem, with the effect that our treatment of the planet has become cumulatively catastrophic for us and most other living things. Global temperature increases are causing glaciers around the world to retreat and Greenland's ice sheet and the polar ice caps to melt. Simplistically, this in turn means that less of the sun's rays are reflected back into space and their heat remains on the planet's surface. The cycle of melting ice is thus self-perpetuating and accelerating. The result is further rising temperatures, rising sea levels, and warmer water, which in turn further impacts the climate. Rising sea levels pose an unimaginable threat to most parts of the world. This could be London or New York in a matter of just a few years, or Karachi or Muscat or Hong Kong, all of these cities. It is a fact that sea levels have risen 24 centimeters since 1880. Now that doesn't seem very much, but the annual rise is now accelerating rapidly and incrementally. And at current rates, a rise of up to 2.2 meters is projected by the year 2100. 2.2 meters, and as much as a staggering 4-meter rise by 2150. Oman has certainly been having its share of climate change-related events. Of course, these are not just consequences of human-specific behavior. Climate change is also caused by factors that include oceanic processes, such as great current circulations like El Niño, variations in solar radiation received by the Earth, and plate tectonics and volcanic eruptions. These are other factors. But let's not fool ourselves. We are the main culprit and the driving force behind global warming. Warming seawater is also causing a seldom discussed crisis with a reduction of phytoplankton across all of the oceans. These almost microscopic life forms are responsible for the generation of as much as 80% of the oxygen we breathe. But in the last few decades, the volume of phytoplankton has declined by some 40%. This is staggering because if they disappear, so do we. So what will further consequences of climate change be, and how will global warming impact our lives? Well, to begin with, we'll see wide-ranging destruction of the environment, of infrastructure and property. People will be affected on an unimaginable scale, especially the poor and those already living at basic subsistence levels. We will see food, drinking water, and general supplies insecurity as floods and other disasters destroy farming communities, pollute water resources, and prevent goods and services reaching the areas most in need. There will be family displacement and mass migration on hitherto unprecedented levels, and critical health issues adding to increased disease and epidemics. The numbers forecast by the World Bank shown here are truly alarming and are a wake-up call for all nations to collaborate and consider how they are going to manage this pending crisis. Gravely, there will be also a breakdown in education, meaning that people who have been receiving even a modicum of teaching will regress. And an educated population is critical for any developing nation. And consequently, so much effort to achieve this around the world will have been wasted. Let's take Jacobabad in central Pakistan as a practical example. Now, this poor town was one of the worst affected areas of massive floods last year, and not actually for the first time. But it also now holds the distinction of being the hottest recorded place on Earth last year. In May, a temperature of 52.8 degrees centigrade was officially documented, on a par with Death Valley in the US. Unofficially, though, such temperatures and even higher ones are now often reached in this region. Now, there is a temperature threshold where life becomes unsustainable with constant exposure, and it is between just 46 and 50 degrees centigrade, after which organ failure begins. Pregnant women have stillbirths and premature deliveries increasing by 5% per degree of temperature increase. Now, there are millions of people in this region, and they are going to have to move soon or perish. We are increasingly going to see extreme weather events causing destruction through fires, cyclones, and even blizzards. So with such a gloomy and pessimistic outlook, how can we even think about tourism against such a doomsday scenario? Well, according to the United Nations World Tourism Organization, tourism is defined as the movement of people to countries or places outside their usual environment for personal or business purposes. And despite all the apocalyptic scenarios described, there are still many millions of people who wish to travel, especially to new destinations that may be considered exotic and offering a sense of safe adventure. In today's world, they have more choices than ever before, and at all price points. But for many nations, tourism is a vital contributor to their GDP. And so they are anxious to develop this industry and prosper from it, regardless of other implications generated from climate change. Let's consider tourism in Oman. The tourism component of the Vision 2040 strategic plan is a thorough and well-articulated blueprint for the development of this important industry. The overall goal of the Oman tourism strategy is to become, and I quote, by 2040, a top-of-mind destination for vacations, discovery, and meetings, in such a way as to contribute to economic diversification. Specific goals include increasing GDP contribution to over 10% compared to a pre-pandemic figure of 3.5, and increasing urbanization to 70%. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's somewhat less than 20% at the moment. Now, all of this is doable. But what if the sea level rises by a meter and the sea inundates all the beautiful resorts that have been developed along Oman's coast? Then this beautiful palace hotel will become this. Or what if the occurrences of the dreaded algae that is called red tide, caused by warming water and pollutants, becomes too frequent? Red tide suffocates the sea below, causing fish to die and already threatened coral reefs to perish. No scuba diving tourism will come then. And what if the temperatures on land frequently reach numbers in excess of 50 degrees centigrade? Who will wish to visit the land of 1,000 forts then? How tragic that would be after so many have been painstakingly restored. Fahoud weather station recorded a staggering 58.5 degrees centigrade in September 2009, while more recently, Jobar recorded 51.6 degrees centigrade in June 2021. Temperatures in the 50s are now being recorded with increasing frequency, both in Oman and neighboring countries. And this is simply too high to sustain life, let alone tourists. This is all simply not acceptable. So the time has come to ask ourselves, have global leaders been doing enough to combat this threat to our continued existence on Earth? And the answer is simply no. They have generally been too preoccupied with clinging to power, avoiding unpopular decisions that could lose them office, and literally fighting among themselves. Under the past leadership of so-called leading nations, their mantra seems simply to have been, we don't give a damn. Responsibility towards the acceleration of climate change, and then secondly, doing something about it. It has been an uphill struggle. Playing the blame game at this stage to apportion culpability is counterproductive. But the bottom line is that more and more people are going to suffer the consequences. So, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on and find solutions. We must look to ourselves and identify and develop a new generation of leaders to steer us through the considerable challenges we shall all be facing. Leaders to rule, direct, guide, and inspire. Leaders who will be passionate to succeed, to do the job properly, to educate and develop others. There are many traits considered necessary for an effective leader to possess. But in order to succeed in tomorrow's world, I suggest that there are a few new imperatives. Looking through these traits, we see emotional intelligence, meaning that leaders must be self-aware and constantly analyzing their performance. They must be technically advanced to understand our brave new world, and they must be flexible and willing to adapt quickly to sudden and unexpected change. And they will need the mindset of innovators and entrepreneurs. Additionally, and perhaps more conventionally, we see other necessary traits, such as sound communication skills and having patience and tolerance. They must be courageous to make bold decisions and sound judgments. Solving any problem requires getting and reviewing all of the facts, deliberating on the solutions, and then making the right decision. So in that context, they must be able to sort through large amounts of data and information and not be fooled by those wishing to deceive. And leaders must have sound manifestations. For global corruption has taken on pandemic proportions and hampers progress. But even with all of these skill sets, what do leaders actually need to do? And what help will they need? Well, firstly, and most importantly, they must act now. They must not wait until it is too late, but recognize that monumental change is coming. And they must get ahead of the game quickly and decisively. Unfortunately, help is at hand, for we have now entered the fourth industrial revolution, which incorporates emerging technologies and even current ones, and frankly, is our potential salvation. I'm talking about artificial intelligence, robotics, and nanotechnology. These will help us solve the problems of food security, energy, pollution, and waste. They will help us with advanced medical procedures and regain healthier oceans. Ultimately, they will help diminish the impact of global warming. And this is not simply mystical jargon for scientists. This technology will also be able to help leaders in the tourism and hospitality industry. So let's just pause for a moment and think about this. Well, what is this revolution all about? Well, it's about interconnection, the ability of machines, devices, sensors, and people to connect and communicate with each other through the Internet of Things. It's about technical assistance, the ability of systems to assist humans in decision-making and problem-solving, and the ability to help humans with difficult, repetitive, or even unsafe tasks. And it's also about information transparency. Humans being able to access vast amounts of data and information, tailored for relevance, to make fast, effective decisions. ChatGPT is a first-generation example of this. And decentralized decisions, the ability of cyber-physical systems, such as robots, to make decisions on their own and to perform tasks as autonomously as possible. And reaching into the realms of nanotechnology, we have a real ally here to help combat global warming by reducing energy consumption, managing carbon, and supporting the production of alternative energy sources. It also has a key role to play in managing pollution and recapturing a cleaner, healthier environment. It's not all going to be easy, and there will be obstacles to overcome, mostly human-driven, originating primarily out of a fear of change and influence. But we shouldn't be afraid. Machines cannot understand what makes each human individual tick. They cannot replace a human being's ability to connect with another human being in terms of emotion, empathy, integrity, honesty. In any case, technically astute leaders with high emotional intelligence will be able to work well and effectively with both people and machines. There will be obstacles. Firstly, there are economic impediments where there is a perception of high costs and unclear benefit. There are social concerns about privacy and personal rights, job losses and distrust of AI and robots. There are political and legislative worries and an absence of clarity through a lack of understanding about exactly what laws and safeguards need to be introduced. Then there are organizational anxieties related to security, reliability, and trust. There is a suspicion and distrust, as top management are often less knowledgeable about the science and innovations than their subordinates. And finally, senior management is worried about setting strategy over subjects that they are not well versed with. They fear pressure to deliver on systems and results they feel they do not control, and they are afraid of failure. But in a nutshell, everything hinges on leadership. Let's look specifically then at what the elements of the fourth industrial revolution can do to assist our future leaders. And how will they help them rise to the challenges these men and women will be facing? To begin with, well-informed strategies must be developed using the extensive and accessible data now becoming available and utilizing the benefits of new systems that assist data mining, such as ChatGPT. Where such strategies already exist, they must be challenged and reconsidered and determined if they are still fit for purpose. In future, data will be king. Leaders and others involved in choosing hotel and resort locations for new project developments must be more thorough than ever before, using robust risk and impact analyses and the best forecasting data available to extrapolate regional climate and other impact trends. They must be exceptionally careful with their selections. Leaders must plan to automate as much as possible, especially regarding transport, security, life safety. It will simply be more efficient. Introduce smart hotel rooms that offer voice-activated information, ordering, customer and image recognition systems. This will not replace people and staff, but rather should be geared to augment the customer experience and again, improve efficiency. Waste management is another key issue for our leaders to embrace. The need for progress in this sector is immense, given the fact that the world generates an estimated excess of 2 billion tons of municipal solid waste annually. Disturbingly, at least 33% of this waste is not being managed in an environmentally safe manner. And looking ahead, global waste is expected to grow to at least 3.5 billion tons a year by 2050. Automating waste management includes a philosophy of zero waste, which is to say a change from the traditional make, use, dispose model to one where in future nothing is sent to landfill. High-tech recycling plants will turn waste into building materials, fuel or electricity. Indeed, this is already happening in some cases. The use of robotics and AI is applied to assist robots recognize and extract recyclable items from landfills and refuse. Robotic arms, AI data systems instruct automated guided vehicles to collect and transport full bins to compactor stations and so forth. Advanced incineration or gasification methods are then used to convert solid waste into electricity and energy. Now, on the subject of waste, I want to introduce a new dimension. Something perhaps you're not expecting. Space tourism, which is to say human space travel for recreational purposes. There are already several different types of space tourism, including orbital, suborbital, and lunar space tourism. To date, 49 people have spent a combined 119 days in space on private tourism. This is just the beginning of a new dimension to tourism and hospitality. Indeed, classes in space tourism are now being taught at the Rochester Institute of Technology in New York and Keio University in Japan, and other courses will follow in other universities very soon. There are many critics who argue that the resources consumed by such activities can and should be more usefully directed towards helping people on Earth, but that's a debate for another time. However, combined space programs to date have produced prodigious amounts of waste. And as with managing the problems of garbage on Earth, we are very bad at cleaning up after ourselves. With tens of thousands of items floating around in orbit around the world, this is now becoming a hazard for space travelers, as well as a poor reflection on our ability to manage our mess. Sooner or later, we will have hoteliers and managers running hospitality venues in space. And as on Earth, waste management will be one of the many issues for them to grapple with. Back on Earth, innovation and a sense of entrepreneurship must be the watchwords of our future leaders. Their businesses should become more self-reliant, producing much of their own food and being water and energy independent. They should manage their own waste and have communications alternatives. All these things can break down or be destroyed in a crisis, such as the damage wrought by a cyclone. So preparation and ensuring that staff are well trained for such eventualities is an imperative. A focus on the domestic development and implementation of clean energy is necessary for tomorrow's leaders. With advancements in solar, wind, and water energy generation systems, self-sufficiency must become a goal to attain for all leaders. And as much self-sufficiency in food production should be aimed for. Here we have data management being linked to AI and robotics to minimize cost, maximize efficiency, and greatly increase much needed volume. Such plans, I suggest, should and could be incorporated into all new large hotel and resort projects. Development costs will be higher, but the longer-term sustainability implications make this hugely important. Understanding what environmental sustainability means is another element for our leaders to take on board. And not just its implications for tourism and hospitality, but the broader community and indeed the whole world. This is all about preserving or even enhancing the environment for the future. So we must manage what we eat, carefully choose our purchasing arrangements, manage our waste and care for each other and the things around us. There are some developers who are actually already doing a fantastic job doing all of these things. And I want to just give you an example of an organization called Off2 Resorts in northern Pakistan. The focus on the entire project has been one of sustainability and nurturing the environment. From design and building materials to the management of water and waste, this company is really a champion. Community engagement has been key, interacting with nature and people in the area for everyone's mutual advantage and benefit. So you see, we can do it right where there's a will. Let us all join with them to promote, develop, and champion environmentally sustainable tourism. And finally, leaders must never forget the need for constant education at all levels for all people of all ages. This is a responsibility for us all to ensure our very survival. And in that educative process, we should also learn from nature, as well as that which is offered in the realms of high tech. We must never forget that we are not the only intelligent beings on this planet. And in the last resort, a leader must not be afraid to admit that they need help. There is no shame in asking for assistance, but there is shame in not asking and then making the mistakes and wrong decisions. Bring in specialists, advisors, and consultants to assist in all processes, planning, assessing risk, AI and cyber systems, etc. They have the experience, expertise and knowledge, and will save you both time and money. Please forgive me if this sounds like a personal business pitch, although I suppose in a way it is, but it is nonetheless the truth. We can stare into our crystal balls for answers as much as we like, but essentially we know what the problems of climate change and global warming are, and what we have to do about mitigating their effects. Proactively seeking solutions and adapting is the only way forward. And after all, that is something that human beings have always been good at. Our leaders of tomorrow need to be inspirational and lead by example, and with excellence and passion. They must abide by the motto, don't do as I say, do as I do. And they have to make a difference. And in conclusion, let me leave you with one last thought. An effective leader never, ever gives up. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charles, for this interesting and very comprehensive session. And actually, it's not only, I thought it will be very scary, but actually it has a lot of hope. And thank you very much for this.
I'm an eternal optimist.
Yes, yes, we need that actually with all what is going on in the world. Thank you very much. And we will open the floor now for the Q&A session. Dear participants, you may raise your question.
Can I?
Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very interesting proposal and language and explanation. I remember you since you were in Intercontinental a long time back.
Okay.
I think what you are proposing is something very interesting, but the impact, of course, of that one in tourism industry or hospitality will be very, very expensive. So how you can balance between what you are proposing for the future leaders and between the actual cost in operation for such kind of hospitality industries, which you know, and I know, the margin is very thin. Thank you very much.
Yes, I mean, this is true. It's a never-ending problem, I think, for developers and investors. They will always want the best, most beautiful property and project developed, and inevitably will always want the quickest and fastest return on investment, and that's sort of business. I just think that for example, the sort of luxury style hotels such as Al Bustan Palace Hotel is the investment required for that sort of project now is going to be massive, and it's going to be even bigger because there are these other things that are needed to accompany it, and that's a bullet that has to be bitten if investors want to have such projects. But there are other types of property, and perhaps there'll be a move away from these palatial properties to more sustainable, smaller boutique style properties, where the total investment doesn't have to be so huge, but you still are able to deliver a more sustainable product. And for example, that thing I showed you in northern Pakistan, After Resort, it actually wasn't hugely expensive in the general scheme of things. It was just a question of prioritizing where the funds and resources needed to go. So, for example, it has 67 chalets and units, only rather than 200 or 250. It has one restaurant, and there is a room service component, but there aren't 2 or 3 different restaurants to choose from. And it's all packaged tightly. to give the maximum amount of choice to visitors without there being too heavy cost commitments. So I hope that perhaps answers your question. Maybe not very satisfactorily, because, as I say, I think one is going to have to bite the bullet for the larger investments.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll take another question. We have, His Excellency Khamis Al-Kioumi, you're okay with the?
Yeah. Of course, most of what he have been already proposed is already implemented, Noman. And the movement of nanotechnology in different direction is already there, and waste management is already there. So most of this, what he have been proposed, is taking directly or indirectly by private sector or by the government itself. But if we want to do that, all of this, and only on the investor of the property, operationally, it will not be feasible. Just from our experience, knowing our region and knowing exactly our cost of operation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Engineer Saleh Al-Shamfari, please go ahead.
Good morning, Charles. Thank you very much for the insightful lecture. I'm a farmer. I'm an agriculturist, and have more than 35 years of experience in developing food projects and food security projects. I'll pick on one or two of what we are doing. I'll give you in the dairy sector, for example, we have implemented the use of biogas as a must in the design of the project. For example, we have converted all the slurry that comes from the animals' waste to be converted into energy. It's the first zero waste, waste management, waste to energy project in the agriculture sector in the country. And that's, it shows its impact. Similarly, we do all recycling of all hard material within the farm. So heading towards zero waste was the goal that we've started in the design of the project, like 5-6 years. But yes, as His Excellency Khamis Al-Kioumi said, there is a lot of cost to this. When we're doing it as a private sector or even quasi-government sector, the cost is that whatever we do, unless there is a very clear incentive, like the way it is in Europe, unless there's a clear incentive, the cost will still be humongous, and then private sector may not be as encouraged as you may think to do it, because there is no reward for that kind of cost and for that kind of efforts. This is something to highlight, and I think it's time to start looking at a legal structure that will allow us to find ways and means to continue this venture. Thank you very much for the insightful direction and words. Thank you, Charles.
I'm very interested to hear your comment about the recycling of animal waste, because the contribution of cattle, particularly to the global warming, is quite considerable. I don't have to hand the exact percentage, but it is a huge amount of gas that is produced by cattle. So recycling it and converting it into energy is fantastic. And I wonder, are there any signals by government to provide assistance and motivation for investment in the private sector in agriculture?
I think, that's very important question to ask, and I think we still have to, a few more steps to go. But look, by understanding the impact of dairy sector on the environment, what we did beside that, we have planted so many trees within the farm. So many trees to impact, also to offset the impact. So I'm talking about thousands and thousands of trees that will will offset, you know, the harm to the environment. And that's one way of also of doing it, you know, is to be a more green contributor to the environment instead of just keep watching. But that is more of an internal process that is continued. However, I think it's time for governments in this part of the world to understand there is a cost to this, and for private sector to continue shifting towards zero waste is not coming for free.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Engineer Saleh. Dr. Ramin Muhajir, please go ahead.
Charles, thank you very much for this initially very scary and then very hopeful presentation. It was really nicely put. I think a word that summarizes your presentation is anthropogenic, which basically means the negative human impact and destruction to the environment. And that's basically a one-word summary of the impact that we have. I think the hospitality sector, at least as a consumer, as somebody that goes to hotels, is a very conscious sector. As a consumer, we see guidance for water consumption, towels, bed sheets, etc. But at the end of the day, it's the human habit at a deeper level. And that's why I want to touch sort of on the grassroots. Although I totally 100% agree with you about the fourth industrial revolution, the impact of AI and nanotechnology. But at the end of the day, it's humans that have to implement these things. In Oman, we really pride ourselves in coexistence among people. And I think another factor that we should work on is coexistence with the environment, because that's one of the solutions. Because ultimately, you mentioned leaders, but leaders are humans at the end of the day. And they really transfer that habit that they have into their leadership implementation and skills. Recently, there was the COP27 organized by the UN in Sharm el-Sheikh, and there were a lot of solutions there as well. I just want to touch on a few things that I think can be implementable in Oman in the long term, not as a short-term profit. One is the government policies. I think sometimes we do things positively, but then we step back. Plastic bags is a very good example. They implemented the fact that you can't use plastic bags in supermarkets, and it was going well. Everybody was forced to get cloth bags and other types of bags, and suddenly it all disappeared, which is, I think, a shame to go a step backwards. Other government policies, Engineer Saleh al-Shamfari mentioned incentives. I think both incentives such as tax cuts, but also compensation, because if the government, which should be the most able body to be worried about the environment, then they should really cough up and not just focus on the tax and other things, but rather compensate farmers that are planting, for example, as Engineer Saleh mentioned, thousands of trees. The second thing is, I think we're a society driven by faith. And I think the role of His Eminence, the Grand Mufti, and other religious leaders, for example, in Friday prayers, I think that role of consciousness really inserts the society and gets to the grassroots of the society. Third thing, and I probably mentioned this before, is education, and you mentioned it as well. I think this recording, for example, it should go to all the schools, because it's very, you provided it nicely with much less words, but effective photos and pictures say 1,000 words. So that kind of awareness, I think, should go to schools. And it's these young people that enter the market and become the leaders that you were talking about earlier on. And finally, I think organizations such as BIA, who are in charge of our, at least in a lot of parts of Oman, they're in charge of the waste and waste management. I think they, no matter how conscious I am about dividing the waste at the level of the home, when I go out in the street to put it in the larger bin, there's only one. So these little steps, I think, contribute to the bigger picture and the environmental impact. So I think it's at the end of the day, it's not one organization, not only government that can do it, but it's really the unity of the people, the government and business world that has to be combined in an effort in order to see a real impact with everything you talked about. Thank you so much, Charles, for the presentation.
Thank you. Can I make a couple of observations on some of your points? I think there needs to be a quantum shift of how governments operate. A new government comes in and they look at the budget and everything starts from how much money is there, and then we've got to apportion through, X% to the military, Y% to education, Z%, and so on it goes. And this is a traditional, conventional way of running a country, or indeed a business. But one needs to actually take a different approach and say, survival is the issue. We've got climate change. What are the impacts of climate change? Because this is serious. I mean, it's going to kill us if we don't address it. And if we start by thinking, what do we need to do to solve the problem and mitigate the problem and impact of global warming, and start from there, and then address all the things that are needed for that, and then see what money's left over, then with any luck, there won't be so much money spent on the military, and it will go to education and waste management and these other issues. So there has to be a complete re-mindsetting of how we do business and how governments manage themselves. To education, yes, by all means, float the presentation around. I'll have to make sure I've got the copyright going right, and I'm very happy to come over and do the live presentations. I do a lot of talks to universities and schools. The most challenging one I did was to a group of 70 4 to 6 year olds, and it was on ocean sustainability. And I was dreading it. I was really nervous because I'd never addressed that many small children before. And they were fantastic. They really got it, and they understood the issues of pollution and environmental degradation and what we were doing to the oceans. So they are receptive to this, and it's a real pleasure and a joy to do the teaching and educating. I suppose just in summary, one watchword is, nature does not need man. Man needs nature. And unless we work with it and become partners with it, then we're finished. Simple as that.
Thank you. And I think when it comes to governments, it's about prioritization. If they get their priorities right, then everything that you said will be implemented. And these 4 to 6 year olds are the future leaders that will make your life and my life easier in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll take another question from His Excellency Munir Makki.
Good afternoon, Charles. It's quite nice to see a friend we have known each other for a
long time,
probably half a century, shall I say, or
more than
or shall
that.
I add?
More than
anyway,
that.
And well, thank you very much for your your presentation. I learned a lot myself. This is it's quite alarming to see this actually. But one of the one of the sides that you did not cover in this presentation, which I understand, it's the political dimension. Unfortunately, the nation states have been created, or the birth of nation states was really 1648, basically in Europe, that these nation states have been born. And when we look back at this, history, we understand that now, in order to cooperate in the endeavors that you are talking about, we need the cooperation of all these nations into a single effort of trying to save our planet and environment. And the problem is that, there are political issues that are emanating from many other countries, and due to different expediencies, like, people talk about, people look at the budget, they look at their, they look at their, maybe some industry might collapse if we do it this way, or we adhere to certain international, constraints on the environment and so on, or on the machinery they use in industry and so on. And we don't have to go back too long when we had an international agreement which was signed by the United Nations and everybody else, and it was overturned by a major country because of political positions and political expediency. So here we are facing really an issue that we are at the mercy of political consideration in some countries, and therefore this has to be basically looked at in a different form. I think it should not be left for politicians and for heads of states to sort of come to an agreements. I think experts from all nations should be led by the United Nations in order to come to an agreement, at least to basic agreements that all states can implement. And from that on, have a sort of a map, a roadmap, in order to tighten the belt on the the pollution and all the problems that we are facing. And these experts, they will present themselves to the nations, to the whole countries, so that the people can understand it is not a political decision. It's a scientific necessity that we should really come to a certain agreements with a clear roadmap, giving us, as you said, you're scaring us by saying 4 meters and 3 meters of water, which is quite significant. And I think, this issue should be addressed, by people like you who are, doing a great job. So basically, political consideration should be put at last, and we have to really, try to basically concentrate on the scientific side of this problem. Thank you, sir.
I think you're absolutely right, and I mentioned earlier on in the presentation the picture of parliamentarians fighting. The thing is, it seems to me, and I don't want to sort of dwell on this much now, but there's a problem essentially with the way that democracy has evolved and the relationship with democracy and capitalism. I suggest is a relationship that is frankly no longer fit for purpose in this brave new world that we're facing. It just isn't. It doesn't provide the flexibility and rapid decision making that is needed on a global level to make the decisions that are needed, some of which are very hard. We could go on quite a long time on this, and maybe we'll do it separately, or we'll do another presentation on politics. It's sensitive ground, so perhaps I should probably shut up, and we'll talk another time on it.
Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khalil Al-Blushi. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, all.
Good afternoon.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Charles. It's very insightful. I have a few points I was reflecting on. Let me start with the political considerations of what was mentioned by Excellency Munir. In this 1 year conflict in Europe, the whole European nations went back to coal. Yeah, that's my dog doesn't like the climate change happening. So yeah, so it is driven by political drive, probably more than a belief in the climate change. Why I say this? 195 countries signed Paris Accord. Was it just to be part of a team and not really believing in it, or is it something that we believe in and that is the drive, not the political? So there are things to kind of consider when it comes to what is driving this, or what should drive this change. COP, for example, COP 27. I did a quick math. COP 27, now COP 28 coming. That is 351 days of discussions and 8,500 almost hours of discussion about climate change since it started. How much we need to make this awareness spread. So that is important. And what is stopping us? I think for example, the obstacles you put organization structure and strategies. Unless you believe in it, it could be people just putting it for the sake of being kind of join the team, join the gang of people talking about it, not really understanding it. I understand it could be a new concept in terms of putting it structurally in the organizations, but it is something that has to be driven by the belief of the importance of something like this. When you talk about, for example, the adaptability, you said humans are adaptive to change. Yes, it is true. We had, I think, ice ages that people have adapted the change, but this is something that we want to prevent the change. So we want to prevent 1.5 degrees, or at least 1.5 or maybe 2 degrees of increase. So we don't want this change. Yes, we are adapted to change. I think the humans will live whatever is the situation, but we don't want this change to happen. So we want to stop this change coming. The last point I want to bring up is the cost, which was mentioned many times. Yes, it is costly now, but maybe because of the volume will bring cost down. So the more we adapt it into the new technologies and new products, the more it will be cheaper to buy and deal with. For example, a company like IKEA, whatever the pronunciation in Swedish, they say we want only companies which have green fuels to ship our products. Then the consumers also, from the consumers part, they should agree to pay that premium for the cause, which is the stop the change of climate change. So it has to be like this. Somebody has to pay the premium, and it has to be agreed to pay the premium. Obviously, incentives are required, but then the consumers need to understand that I'm happy to pay this. Thank you.
You're absolutely right, and that is very much an important part of, I believe, with supermarket chains, for example, and the amount of plastic wrapping that they put all their products in is sickening, and it's not necessary, and they need to lead by example, and customers need to say, if you put plastic packaging around your vegetables, we're not buying it. But I want to come back to your first point. I think the reason that not enough urgency is being applied to this whole issue is because people still don't actually get the fact that if we don't sort this, we are going to die. You know, it's as simple as that. The human race will become extinct. And it won't become extinct because of long-term concerns and anxieties of nuclear holocaust and a meteorite slamming into the planet. It's going to become extinct because we've mucked it up ourselves. We've brought it upon ourselves. And that message needs to go around and be hammered into everybody so that they understand just how serious this is. Shock tactics, I think that's what's required. You talked about cost. We can't afford not to address these issues. So whatever it costs, it has to be taken on. We are really in a critical state and people just aren't getting that.
What is important to, sorry, just last comment is we need to understand that we can't beat the environment. The nature is stronger. It's just to kind of complement it and live with it instead of competing in the nature. So we can't stop it. When it goes bad really bad.
It's true.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khalil. Mr. Nick Pattison, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. You want my lovely picture? Probably not, but there you go. Yeah, not only do I not disagree with anything that's been said, I think we're really talking about the nub of the problem. And thank you, Charles, for providing such a stimulating and instructive talk. The situation is serious, of course, but it's actually going to get worse because politics and pressure groups are confusing and blurring the issues, in my view. And I'd just like to put some figures onto some of the subjects we've been talking about. You know, every country in the world is, not every country, but probably 40 or 50 countries are trying very hard to reduce their CO2 output. Why? Why? 3 countries produce 51%, China, US and India. China were to cut back by 50%, problem solved, at least for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Now, of course, one cannot say, China, you've got to do this. And it comes back to the comments that were made about having an approach which all countries, or at least all countries with resources, can get together and resolve these issues. Another figure, in 2022, China approved 106, I think it was, gigawatts of new coal-fired power stations. So why does anybody else bother to cut back on their coal-fired power stations? Because it isn't going to make any difference. All the last 25 years that Britain has done, it's not just Britain, lots of other countries, Oman, have been negated by 1 week of China's coal-fired power stations. So we've got to have a world approach to this, as other people, of course, have been saying. Thanks very much.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And this is why, going back to Munia Maki's comments about a sort of UN-driven leadership that takes on the challenge and brings everybody along with it. Personally, I'm afraid I'm not very optimistic that that works. We're not seeing enough progress with COP. We're not seeing, you know, people know the issues, people talk about the problems, but collectively, global leadership doesn't get stuck in and sort it. And they've got all sorts of reasons. And usually in the democracies, they don't do it because there's too many other pressures forced on those leaders to keep in power. And if you push, you know, you say, right, we're going to ban coal-fired power stations, the coal industry says, oh, well, then you're not going to get our vote. And this sort of type of thing goes on. So I think it's what one needs benevolent dictatorship for planetary salvation. Any volunteers? Anyway, difficult.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Nick, Mr. Charles. Another question from Mr. Haji Al-Belushi. Do you have a question? You're muted. Mr. Haji, do you have a question? Yeah, you are muted. You're on mute. Can you unmute, please? I've sent you a request to unmute. If you can just please respond to that. It's okay. Until you get ready with the question, we will just move to Engineer Azhar Al-Qaisi. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Charles, for this presentation. Really, I want to mention another consequences because of climate change and to the construction field. Construction field is very important. This is the building that we live in it, like hotels, homes, offices, any construction. The consequences on this building is too much because of the floods and earthquake and cyclones and any other things that happen because of the climate change. For that reason, just I want to mention, we need to ask the engineers to review all the design of the building and to reconsideration on the type of the material that being used in the building for insulation, for windows, for glasses, for many things, not just for the energy and type of energy that we will use it in the building. Very important thing that to change our old methods in the design and old method of the using type of materials in order to mitigate some problems that happen because of the climate change. Thank you.
I think you're absolutely right. And one sees after cyclones the devastation that is caused in communities, but not just third world communities in the United States or other places. And you look at the type of buildings that have been demolished, and it's unbelievable how fragile and flimsy they are and how poor the construction has been. And I find it staggering. So I think you're absolutely right. Design of buildings relevant and appropriate to the areas in which they're being constructed is a vital part of mitigating the impact of global warming. So thank you.
And I know that this will affect the cost of the building and construction of the building, but we have to go on in order to keep people in safe condition.
But I don't think it necessarily does have to be more costly, because the subsequent energy savings by a well-constructed building are hugely relevant to the overall construction. And I think there just needs to be people stepping back, stepping aside and taking a fresh look at what are the requirements of a home and a house and an apartment building, so that a fresh approach can be taken to doing things right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed Al-Raziqi.
Thank you very much, Charles, for your very insightful and very stimulated presentation. We all believe that there's a disaster around us from climate. But what I see also, there's also within data, there's a new trend of consumers. Engineer Saleh talked about the food, but now there's also a trend toward plant-based food. And what we see that plant-based and the seafood, they're becoming the #1 in the new consumer trends. We noticed that there's a struggle. Like Batson point of the opportunity cost and how the big impact from the 4 countries toward the very minor and the less significant impact from the rest of the world. So there's a struggle in implementing the COP agendas. It happens over since 2015, I guess, or 2014 till now. We don't see or we don't observe a big input from nations toward the mitigation of climate impacts. And there is no efforts toward stabilizing the weather or stabilizing the climate. At least to stabilize it, then we could start with the new. But now what happens in the COVID-19, the people change, the whole life changed. And what I like from the data that you gave us regarding the phytoplankton, when they become under stress of weather from the sea, from the acidity of the sea, or from the salt of the sea, or maybe from the global warming. But also there are viruses that emerged. You see the COVID, I don't know about the nature of the viruses and how they became virulent, but the viruses, the small macroscopic structures, they also had changed because of stresses. Probably could be the case. So now what's the reliance, I think, is the consumer. And the consumer, if we think about the consumer-oriented approach, the consumer now, they're more aware about the climate and about their life, the health, the nutrition, and also about the lifestyle. So if we think about the tourism as industries, the tourism is elastic. It tends to be elastic. That means a small change in the price would make also a change in terms of consumer acceptance or preference or choice. But now there must be an alternative, which is a green tourism. That could be the alternative. So if nations, let's say if nations, especially the other countries, other than the 4 countries of the biggest impact, could start with this green implementation of tourism with incentives. Could be tax-free or could be incentives in reducing the prices. And I think this would also make an impact on change toward the consumption or sustainable choices of green tourism. So I need your word in this. What do you think about the consumer-oriented approach, starting from the health part as well as the climate change, especially in the new return of life in the post-COVID-19 arena? So thank you very much, Charles, for all the information, and thanks a lot for the good science. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there is an opportunity for tourism, which is what I would call immersive tourism. I run a number of programs in Pakistan, which are called A Day in the Life of. And so the participants, the tourists, spend a day or a couple of days in a mine, or tending sheep or goats, or doing agricultural work, or panning for gold in the river, or various other immersive things. And we're looking at extending that to programs which relate to climate mitigation. Excuse me, global warming impact mitigation. So I think there's a lot of grounds for developing ideas like this.
Thank you, Charles. I think that's a valid point. But how about the waste? Do you think, because what you say based on the data that you have, you say there would be an increase of 75% in waste from 2 billion metric tons by 2030. So there would be an increase around 75% from 2 to 3.5 billion metric tons. So do you think the awareness could matter? Because I think if we rely on governance structure, there might be, some obstacles, because it needs a cost. Sheikh Khamis, he mentioned about the cost, and I think there'll be a huge cost to rely on governance structure. But whereas if the reliance is on consumer, might be very dramatic changes. Thank you.
No, the waste management and the development of new technologies and systems is mostly, as far as I'm aware, all down to the private sector. And certainly around Europe, it's privately driven, and in many other countries, I'm sure that's the case. But I think it's actually, I mean, there's an expression in the UK from the north in Yorkshire, and I'll try and use the accent, so please forgive me if you don't actually understand the words, and I'll translate, but it's where there's muck, there's brass. And that means where there is junk and waste, there's money to be had. And managing waste can be quite a profitable business. And the new technologies for managing it properly and well and sustainably are very exciting. And I'm quite encouraged to see how this is going to develop. Pakistan, where I live, is really, has to be said, not one of the cleanest countries. You look at Lahore or Karachi, it really is a mess. But in Lahore, for example, there's a company that's just started business, a private concern, looking at waste management and embracing some of the technologies that we've been discussing. And they're fantastic, and they've got the robots out, and they've got the AI doing the counting and saying, right, you need to go to this place to pick up that. And there is slowly evolving a consciousness of, non-acceptance of this trashing the countryside, throwing the plastic bags around, and so on. So I'm optimistic that we're going to make progress, because I think there are people who really get the idea and the message. So I hope I'm right, and I hope we have enough people doing this in enough time. But time is the thing against us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you all. We have covered all the questions so far. And the last comment from Mr. Khalil in the chat, he said that the change or stopping the climate change starts with individuals. So what is your pledge to yourself? I think this question is for all of us. Thank you very much, Mr. Khalil. Mr. Charles, over to you to summarize this session. We can close that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, there is a very real possibility that mankind has come to the end of the road, and that the sixth extinction will not be caused by a meteorite hitting the planet or by a nuclear holocaust, but by leadership incompetence, selfishness, and greed. We are not an inherently stupid species, but we are certainly acting like one, and we are now on the brink of self-annihilation. Let us hope that enough of us can nurture and develop the talent in Generation Alpha and those that follow to produce the leaders that will be our salvation, both at a global level and in the context of tourism and hospitality. Our legacy for future generations has not been good. Let us hope we can redeem ourselves before it is too late. Once again, thank you for inviting me, and I hope to have the opportunity to visit again Oman before too long and meet with you and others, both at hotels, in schools and universities, and in the public and private sectors. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charles. Dear guests, we have reached to the end of our session today. We thank Mr. Charles for the very interesting talk, and thank you all for your participation. See you next Saturday with a new topic. Until we see you, keep safe and goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated.
Thank you.